you good? Yep.
I'm unmuting you now,
All right.
and you're live.
Good to go. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jared Stewart. I'm the President and CEO at Bethany Community Services in Haverhill. And tonight we're going to do a presentation on the Garrison Street housing project that we've discussed. I do have our team here. I'll let them introduce themselves. If you would go ahead, Jay.
Good evening. My name is Jay Polakowitz with Hancock Associates. I'm one of the engineers working on the project.
Hi, I'm Maura Kamasi, and I am working on the finance part of the project.
Hey, Stefano Basso with SV Design, the project architect.
All right, thank you. So I plan to have a PowerPoint presentation, which we do have, but it's not working. We're having some technical issues, so I will do the presentation verbally. We do have some boards that we brought so that we can share those and you can look at those. But I will just go through what I had prepared to present, but unfortunately we're not able to project that.
We're able to project it, your computer's not.
That's true. It's not the, you're not IT, the TV, it's not his fault. It's definitely on our end for our technology, so. The presentation itself is not loading. It's not coming up,
The computer
so.
has that blue screen of swirl.
Yeah, it's got a blue screen and it's just spinning, so it's not a good sign. So, but you know what? I can send that out. I'm glad to actually provide that. You could have the presentation. I can post that online, and you can look at the notes that we have. So. Okay, I could do that. Yep, there's nothing there that is private. I was going to share it with you tonight, so I'm glad to put that out there. Quickly, I know some of you may have come on Monday night. We presented to the select board, so some of this might be a little bit redundant, but there might be some new people here as well, so I'm glad to give a little bit of a background first. Bethany Community Services, we are based in Haverhill. We've been around since 1965. We're a nonprofit developer and manager of affordable housing. We specialize in housing and services for seniors. We don't manage family housing. We really just do senior housing. We manage 4 affordable sites in Haverhill, and we manage 2 other communities, one in Boxford, 4 Mile Village on Ipswich Road, and we manage Nichols Village as well, right down the road at 54 Main Street. So altogether, we have 620 units of housing that we manage. And again, we're located here in Groveland and in Boxford and in Haverhill. We have a new 48-unit development, hopefully opening next week. Bethany is a mission-driven organization, nonprofit. Our focus is on providing clean, safe, quality, and affordable housing. One thing that differentiates us, I think, from other housing providers in supporting older adults is that we provide services and resident service coordination so that at all of our locations we have staff on site who are able to work with the residents who live there to help with all kinds of service issues that they may have. Again, we are familiar to Groveland, having managed Nichols for these past 20 years, which were the first 20 years of Nichols Village. And I think we have a positive track record in the town. I think we've had a good working relationship with the town departments that we've worked with, whether that's the police department, fire, building inspector, and the rest of the town departments, I think would comment favorably about the work that we have done at Nichols Village. When we first started looking at this potential for Garrison Street, we talked to the Nichols Foundation and received permission to explore this opportunity. We did some research. I began looking at the need for housing in Groveland. And it was pretty apparent looking at the housing production plan, as well as the comprehensive plan that the town put forth last year, that there is a significant need for affordable housing, and specifically for senior affordable housing. And we did some market research, as I mentioned before, that really confirmed that need. We looked at 5 towns in the area. We looked at Groveland, Georgetown, West Newbury, Byfield, and Boxford. And of those 5 towns, there is no senior affordable housing community. So there is a desperate need for housing in this area. Again, we looked at the comprehensive plan, and if you read through it, I think you'll see many areas that talk about a significant need for the aging population in Groveland. And specifically, it talks about the need for seniors to be able to age in place, in a place where they can afford to stay, and they don't have an option currently for downsizing in Groveland. A few other statistics I think are important regarding the aging population in Groveland. According to the Housing Production Plan, between 2020 and 2050, they anticipate a 40% increase and the number of residents who will be over age 65, leading to the year 2050, when they anticipate 1 in 3 residents living in town will be in that age group of over 65. The production plan also talked a lot about the fact that there's a great need for more accessible units in town. We do talk about aging in place. I do realize that individuals would like to stay in their own home and try to age in place where they are. The issue that we see with many seniors is that typically most homes are not accessible. They usually get to a point where they'll have difficulty with stairs, entering, exiting, the width as far as navigating their apartment or their home gets to be challenging. Things like bathing, it's difficult to get in or out of a tub. So the need for accessible units in town is greatly needed. And that's also one thing I would say too, is that the production plan did talk about the ability to downsize into both physically and financially accessible housing. As we know, when older adults age, typically this is a fixed income group. And with a fixed income crowd of seniors, when we have things like we've had recently with inflation, typically seniors are more affected than other people who are still working. So the fact that there is a great need for more income-based, fixed income, affordable housing is through and through. For Garrison Street in particular, we're looking at, as we know, 36 Garrison Street. It's a fairly significant size parcel. It's almost 7 acres, 6.7 acres. On that site, and it might even go back before the 1800s, but from the 1800s up into the early 1900s, it was the Nichols family home. And in 1925, N. Woodburn Nichols had passed away. And in his will, he had left, this was the terminology from the time, which has since changed, but he had desired for that site to have a home for the aged and indigent elderly. We certainly don't use terms like aged and indigent so much anymore, but now we would say this would be affordable housing for older adults. That's what he was thinking about, as long as 99 years ago upon his passing. So Nichols Village and the Nichols Foundation managed the foundation and the trust from 1925, and they still do, but up until about the year 2000 is when they started looking at building Nichols Village. Now, they had done a remarkable job at managing the investments, and what they wanted to build, as you'll see at Nichols Village, if you've been up to Nichols Village, is much more significant and larger than would have fit on Garrison Street. So they got permission from the town as well as the state to build Nichols Village at 54 Main Street. And again, it is much larger than you would fit on the parcel on Garrison Street. So at this point on Garrison Street, as we started to look at the town's needs, we've done our own research to figure out whether this would work. It seems as though that is true, that the town certainly needs senior affordable housing. We explored Garrison Street for this past year, maybe a little bit less. At this point, as you know, we submitted preliminary plans to the state for a project eligibility determination. I was at the Select Board on Monday. I believe the Select Board had received a comment period letter, a 30-day comment period letter from the state to provide feedback. Typically what would happen is once that period expires, the state would at some point make a determination on whether we are eligible, and at that point we would then consider filing plans with the town to move ahead with any plans for a project. Our initial plans, as we talked about the other night, when we're looking at a site like this, the determination we first make is whether or not, how many units could you possibly build. So we looked at kind of a maximum build-out plan, which we came up with 90 one-bedroom units would be the maximum. Knowing that's a fairly significant size, we decided to approach this with 2 phases. So we're looking at doing 2 buildings of 45 units each. When you look at these plans, we have some up over here. We would first consider the building that is furthest away from the street. So that would be the first one. And again, I think based upon the research we've done, 90 units of housing, I believe there would be a demand for that. I believe that could be filled. I'm fairly conservative. I'd like to take the approach of a phased approach. I'd like to consider one building first. I'd like to get a building built. I'd like to get it full. I'd like to operate it and make sure it works. And the second building is something that we would like to keep in mind, but at this point, that would be a second phase later down the road. From a time frame perspective also, I think it's important just to note that if we were on a fast track, if we filed this year and if we got through the zoning and if we got permission from the state to build, I would say at a very minimum, it's probably at least 3 years away from this being close to being finished. It's more likely, I would say probably 4 years. It could even be 5 years. So this is not a project, even though we're talking about it now, that is going to come to fruition, if it does, for several years. But again, we would start with that second building of 45 units, and we would take this phased approach. The funding for these projects, again, we apply to the state through the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. They are the agency responsible for providing funding for these programs, typically through federal and state low-income housing tax credits and other state funding that they would provide. Specifically on Garrison Village, I want to talk a little bit about just some details. Again, this would be an age-restricted property. It would be for 62 and over. All residents would need to be at least 62 or older. These would be all one-bedroom units, either for 1 or 2 people, so it'd be for an individual or a couple. These would be between 600 and 700 square feet. The minimum we'd have to do is at least 600, but we'd hopefully be closer to 700, somewhere in that 600 to 700 square foot range. Each unit would have a bedroom, a living area, a full kitchen and a bathroom. It's important to note these would all be independent living units. I know the question has come up whether there would be assisted living or skilled nursing. This would not be assisted living. It would not be a nursing home. This is really independent living for residents who could receive supports. But the goal that we have with residents aging in place in our communities is to provide enough support for them to stay independent for as long as possible. The units that SV Design has been working on would also be what we somewhat call adaptable. We would have some accessible units, but we would try to make it so that all of the units would be easily adaptable, so that as individuals age in place, they could easily convert these units. So if they were in a wheelchair or had a mobility device, they could easily navigate the unit itself. We'd have the proper widths for hallways and turning radiuses and bathrooms and those kind of things. So we would plan ahead for people. If they come in younger and as they age, they should be able to stay there for as long as they could. There would be 2 elevators in each building, and there would be some income eligibility guidelines, which I'll talk about in a minute. A few other highlights for what we like to do here. We would have community space. Again, we've talked to the Council on Aging, who is supportive of our efforts about having events on site and shared programming, where we would not only have the residents who live at Garrison Village able to participate, but we'd reach out to the community, and we'd love to host events and be a part of the community as well. So we appreciate that. We know that currently there is not a senior center, and as I've said before, we couldn't build a senior center, but we're hoping to build a large enough space that would accommodate mid to large size groups if we were going to have an event, a musical event, an educational event, social event, whatever that might be. We'd like to be able to integrate and have those activities together. We also would like to have a fitness room, possibly a small library. There's going to be office space in the building. We'd like to have outdoor spaces for recreation that would have some benches, possibly gardening. And also, I think it's important that there's not going to be a community dining room. We would not have a commercial kitchen. We're not going to do a meal program at this facility. At Nichols Village, they have a large dining room and a full-service food operation. This wouldn't be that. The apartments are all outfitted with full kitchens, so we certainly can coordinate meal delivery, Meals on Wheels, and other things like that. That's what our staff would do, but there's no plans for a community dining area. I think one other good benefit to this would be the concept of the maintenance-free living. I think it's very nice when older adults move into a community where they don't have to worry about snow removal or landscaping. And we also have 24/7 on-call maintenance. So if there's an issue that comes up after hours or on a weekend, all of our residences have a number to call, and usually a staff member can show up within 15 to 20 minutes to help fix whatever the issue is in an emergency. The next few slides would have been great to have as a visual, because people sometimes would ask, what is affordable housing? What does that mean? Affordable housing typically involves some type of government funding, either federal or state financing, and it's also typically based upon income. So we look at the area median income for different segments of the population. I did print these out. I'm glad to, again, send these slides out so you can look at that. It's fairly easy to look up what the income limits would be. For these programs and for this site, what we would typically do is look at a percentage of income, typically based on area median income of 30%, 50%, 60%, 80%, or unrestricted. So we have different allocations of the 45 units. Our initial plan was to have between 16 and 20 of those at the 30% area median income, 17 to 21 at 60%, and then we would have 5 units at 80%, and then we'd have 3 units that would be unrestricted. So what we're trying to do there is, when looking at the market research in the study and the income levels, we're trying to match up what is the greatest need in the town, how could we fill these units with the income levels that are there. So we're trying to, again, have different levels that we would match. I just got a few more things, and then we can have our other teammates talk about the project as well. All right, so again, I did talk a little bit about the market study. I'll go back to that. Again, we covered the 5 towns I had mentioned: Groveland, Georgetown, West Newbury, Boxford, and Byfield. And we compared rents. So we're looking at rents for this project would be between $1,500 to $2,000 a month. Those would be more for the non-subsidy units. If you're on a 30% or 50% area median income, typically there would be a subsidy attached. This is when those residents would pay 30% of their income as rent. So if you're in the lower income band and you're making X dollars, you would pay 30% of your monthly income as rent. So that's obviously a great advantage to those residents. The 60 or 80% or unrestricted rents in that $1,500 to $2,000 range, compared to other rents that we looked at, we compared in the Georgetown and Haverhill community rentals. The range currently for comparable apartments is between $1,800 and $2,500. So the rents that we're looking at are essentially below what the current market rate rents would be. On that, I guess I'll just leave a couple more things I just want to talk about, and then we can talk about the project and show some visuals. Again, not to be too repetitive, but I think it's important to note that at Bethany, we are local. We are in Haverhill. We're already in Groveland. As I said the other night at the select board meeting, we don't leave town. We're not a typical developer that might come in, build a project, and then leave and hire outside management. We build our projects, we manage our own projects, we hire with our own staff, and we take pride in ownership. Our downtown properties in Haverhill, people will come in. I often get a lot of comments that say, wow, this is really clean. This is amazing. Your staff does a really good job. We hear that often, no matter where you go. If you go to Nichols Village, you'll say the same thing. Wow, this is beautiful. It's clean. So we manage our own projects. We don't hire outside management. I think that's important. Again, we've been in Groveland now for 20 years at Nichols Village. The nonprofit mission focus, this is why we were created. When I look back to see in our original articles of organization from 1965, it talked about building housing for people who need it, but also doing things that will provide opportunities for cultural, social, educational, and recreational opportunities so that seniors will be engaged in their community and that they will have opportunities to do those things. Now, living in community is important. When we talk about, and I'm sure Alyssa might know this as the Council on Aging Director, but the biggest thing we combat is social isolation and boredom of seniors. And people who live on their own, I think, become isolated more quickly, especially when their mobility decreases and if they can't transport themselves any longer. If you're living alone, that has shown to be detrimental from a health perspective. One of the quotes I read today from the National Institute of Health talks about studies that show that loneliness and social isolation are associated with higher risk for health problems like heart disease, depression, and cognitive decline. So what I'm telling you today, I think here with what we do at Bethany, is not only do we provide clean, safe, quality, affordable housing, we also create communities where our residents can be engaged. They can socialize with others. It's a healthier thing to be living in a community with other people your age where you can go down the hall and go to an activity, you can go to an event, you can participate with others your age, and I think those people actually remain independent for much longer than they do staying on their own. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. We do have Jay here. We can talk a little bit about the site design, and we do have some visuals to share. We'll do that, and then we can take some questions. All right.
Thank you, Jared. So I'm going to start initially with the existing conditions on this site. Garrison Street's down here. There's this upper tier that's near the street level. The site tapers back to a lower tier in the rear. Off to the west, there are wetlands. Our wetland staff evaluated the wetlands, flagged them, and we survey located them. It's shown here. The proposed development's completely outside of the 100-foot buffer zone to wetlands. Access to the site is from down here. This would be the main entrance and exit to the site. The site has a circular pattern to it. It's currently two-way. Parking is provided for each building. This is what's called Building A, and this is what's called Building B. A little bit confusing, but Building B is Phase 1, and Building A would be Phase 2. There's emergency access over here, and that would be strictly for emergency vehicles. Because the site tapers down from the street, we are proposing the buildings to be 2 stories from the street with a walkout basement on the rear. So that's the same for both buildings. We have done on-site soil testing to determine soil types and groundwater. So we are showing potential locations for subsurface stormwater systems. That's what these rectangles are in different places. We had some initial conversations with the DPW, who said that they're relatively newer utilities in the street and there are capacity for this development here. As you can see, most of the site is still green space. Sorry. Yep, that there are newer utilities in Garrison Street and that there's capacity for this development. There's a lot of green space on site that's being maintained. The whole development will be within the existing tree line, and there'll be a courtyard between the 2 buildings that connects the 2 buildings. And I think that's about it on a site perspective. So.
All right, that's good. Thank you, Jay. And now, Stefano, I don't know if you want to, we can show the visuals now, and if you want to take it over.
Yeah, I can just borrow your site plan for a sec.
Go for it.
So when we were looking at laying out the buildings on the site and the site circulation, it's typically something that the fire department likes to see, that you can access all sides of the site around the buildings. So that's why we included this loop that you can make your way around all sides of the buildings here. We tested a lot of schemes before we arrived at this one. We looked at some schemes that had more of a consolidated building and parking layout. And while those are more efficient in terms of site work and getting things to lay out a little tighter, we thought that this scheme worked really well for the neighborhood and for the landscape. The idea of trying to maintain a sort of rural aesthetic so that you don't so that you're not greeted by too much building massing upon arrival. We're using the T-shaped building layout, which is a sort of architectural trick that helps to conceal some of the mass of the building. You don't see the length of it. You're kind of approaching at different angles as you work your way around the site. We introduce different types of siding and different aesthetics that help to break up the apparent massing of the building. There's a lot of green space too that we maintain, which is helpful that residents can use that space for outdoor activity and to do walks around the site.
Could you use that other podium, because I can't get a camera angle over there.
Sure. Yeah.
They can turn the mic off. Green. Flashing. You want this one? Oh, the other one. Thanks.
Better? Looking at the floor plans, if you're able to read this, we have the apartments in blue, hallways in yellow, and common space in green. So we've located the primary entry of the buildings towards the center of the T, with egress stairs at the ends of all the hallways, and double-loaded corridor of one-bedroom apartments, as Jared mentioned. They're all about 700 square feet. full kitchen, bath, living room, bedroom. On building A, which is on the bottom here, we have the walkout basement level all the way to the left. So you can see that we only have units on one side of the building there that walk out the back. The rest is unexcavated below grade. In the middle here, we have the second floor. That's the floor that you would see coming into the site up the driveway. So you would see these 2 stories here from the road. In the front, we've created a main entry space. A really important feature for Bethany Communities was creating a sense of arrival for folks that might not be familiar with the site. You come in the driveway, and it's visually apparent where you want to go. So we've added a large covered porch at this main entryway here. And off of that, we're placing a larger community room that could be used by the senior center. It could be used for various events, and then the large covered porch would provide outdoor shaded space for activities that could be indoor and outdoor there. We also have all the things that the building needs: the mail package room, toilet rooms, property manager's office. We have laundry located on every floor for residents, common laundry rooms. And up on the second floor here, we have more limited common space, but there's additional space that could be used for other programs such as the fitness room, library, computer room, things like that. Building B on top here, this would be phase 1, so same thing, lowest level at the bottom. On this building, the walkout basement is on these sides, so still facing away from the street. We were trying to use the natural grade of the site, as Jay mentioned, that slopes down away from the road, to also work with us to conceal some of the height of the building that you see from the street. So the main entryway on building B is on the left side here. So we're thinking of a similar scheme overall, similar program and layout with a larger community space, maybe not quite as big, maybe not as much of a covered porch, but a little bit of the same program. On the second floor in the middle here, that's the level that opens up to the courtyard. So when you look at these 2 buildings here, the portion that is 3-story, if you're looking at the building, on building A is back on this side. On building B, it's here. And the part that you would see as 2-story would be this side here and this part along here.
On building B, can we just, on that short leg that jumps out this way?
Yep.
Yep, right there, up and down. If you bring your hand down, is that the 3-story view or 2?
2-story through here.
Okay, so then it's 3 facing,
Three
the
ba-
lot.
3 back here.
I think
Yep.
it's 3 facing west, right?
And north, yep.
I think Fairview's here, right?
Yep.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, so we have,
So the only wall you can point out to is facing the backyards of everybody's property on Fairview Circle.
yeah, so we are maintaining all of the existing tree coverage that surrounds the site. We've taken care to keep the loop within the existing tree barrier. So the only part that we're clearing out is the clump that's in the middle towards the front of the site. So that'll provide good amount of tree cover in terms of buffer. And we'll be adding additional landscape for screening too,
Right.
strategically. So we're working through the design of the building. We're still refining what the exterior wants to look like. So we're trying to match some of the architectural vernacular that's in the neighborhood. So what's the look and feel of the homes that are nearby? So we're picking up on some of the cues. We looked at the historic photos
Yep.
of the house that was on the property before. There's a lot of great architectural details that we can borrow. We're bringing in some, some type of New England farmland type architecture without trying to make it look like a farm, but borrowing some of the nicer proportions in terms of gable roof, standing seam metal roof details, double hung windows with different grille patterns. As the buildings bump in and bump out, as you go around the building, we take opportunity to change the roof line with gable roofs that run perpendicular to one another, step the roof heights at various locations, and introduce new siding types. So for the main body of the building, at this time we're picturing a white clapboard scheme, very traditional, white clapboards, white trim with a black sash window with the divided grille. And then some of these other end pieces, we're using more of a light gray siding with maybe a larger clapboard or shiplap siding there. Different window pattern, and then a little small for folks, but on some of the ends of the building, we're thinking maybe like a red, rusty red type color, more standing seam metal roof on the porch to try to help break up the building.
What kind of roofing materials are you planning on using?
So the main roof lines will be asphalt shingle. So you'll see where the roof, kind of at the top of the building that you see, it's asphalt shingles for the most part through there.
Some of the warranties are for 25 years and some are for 45, so which ones are you planning on using?
We're planning on using high-quality building materials. All the siding types will be cementitious siding with factory finish that have a really long lifespan. They take paint really well. So when we set up these projects, we set them up to be maintenance-free to the extent possible, because the way these projects are funded, you kind of get one crack at a lot of the big building construction. So we take care to use really high quality siding. We don't skimp on the moisture barrier that goes on the building. We'll be using a lot of extra insulation. This is planned to be a passive house project, so
Can be placed in or sprayed in?
it'll be a mix. So on the walls, we use continuous rigid insulation on the outside of the wood sheathing. And then in the roof, depending on what the construction is, it could be a sprayed-in foam, or it could be another type of insulation. But we work with a consultant in terms of getting passive house certification. It's a really high bar in terms of energy efficiency. Usually triple paned windows. It can't just be any vinyl window from the lumberyard. A lot of building tightness, and then the HVAC systems are commissioned so that they're not oversized or undersized, but they function just right. It'll be an all-electric building. So really trying to set up the project so that it's, yeah, it's a little early to know exactly what the system is, but it'll be some sort of heat pump. So either a mini split system or a ducted heat pump system, but yeah, no gas. All electric, hot water too. I think we're planning for solar panels on the roof.
It's preliminary, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
so-
some of these questions, we're not quite at the level of detail yet.
Sorry if I'm
but-
getting ahead of myself here.
No, but certainly the passive house standard Stefan was talking about is a very high standard in terms of energy efficiency, hard to achieve. So I would think roofing material insulation, those are going to be extremely efficient.
Now, my research on solar is that we have 7, 8, 9-year-old African children mining the materials that go into solar, which eventually ends up in communist Red China. I get 3 calls a week for my wife and I to buy solar, and before I can even finish the story, they've already gone click. Have you folks done any research on who's making the solar? Because I'm not the least bit interested in financing communist Red China.
So the state building code requires that we frame the roof to be capable to handle the weight of the solar panels. And the energy code requires that we size our electrical panels and provide circuit breakers so that you can install the solar panels really easily afterwards. But in terms of, who's making the panels or anything, I think it's
Yeah.
too early in the process.
And I would say we've looked at solar at all of our locations, and we haven't gone with solar panels for a lot of different reasons, but the project that we're just completing right now in Haverhill, again, is scheduled to open this week. We did not end up doing solar. We ended up cutting solar from that, which the state likes to see it. It can be more efficient, but there's a lot of issues with it, and I don't know, for a nonprofit, we don't get the tax benefits either, so it's just, we don't know. I guess to answer your question, I think it's too early to tell whether we're going to do solar or not. That'll probably come as we go through the process. Can you afford solar? Can you not afford it? Do we have to do it? Will the state require it? And again, we're not quite there in terms of deciding. Yep.
But yeah, I mean, the project is set up to be sustainable both from an energy standpoint, but also sustainable in terms of long-term maintenance, the quality of the property, in terms of the landscaping. We're bringing on a landscape architect who will help us specify all native species, drought-tolerant plants, so that it's not, a property that is infeasible to be maintained and then starts to look bad over time. We want to create something that's easy to operate and operates well for a long time. So a lot of attention and care goes into that process.
I think there was a question back in the back.
As condition of the street view, is that accurate? Because building A, that length of that back section is 225 feet long. That doesn't, it's only 75 feet from the road. That doesn't look correct. Is that accurate, that drawing?
So we've been, if you saw the project eligibility plans, we have been tweaking the layout still. So until we file for the comprehensive permit application, we're still trying to improve the project and tweak it. So we've done some things that have helped to shorten the length of the building to try to make it so we're still kind of tightening things. And you can look at this view, but we're still working through what the other side looks like. So we'll have more renderings of all the sides as we develop it. Do you like this one, Jared?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we talked about it Monday, we've talked about it over time. Like, the look and feel is important. We did have the picture of the Nichols home, and we shared that with the architects and said, this is New England. We don't want this to stick out like a typical rental property, a modern-looking rental property. It's very important, and part of the reason I decided to choose SV Design for this project was SV Design has done some great projects. One just opened in Wenham not too long ago. They've done some in Rockport and in Beverly. They just have the look and feel that what we want, what I think fits in Groveland, and I think that's important. So this looks pretty good to me. I think, kind of a house and barn type look. We might do some different things with the roof lines to break it up a little bit. As we said, it is preliminary. You have to start somewhere, and I think that's what we're trying to do is try to shape this into something that will look right, that'll be good. But the landscaping is very important too. The comments about the screening in the winter when there's no leaves, those are things we have thought about and talked about, and we'd like to try to address and figure out how that would work. On Fairview too, in that lower level, I think part of the issue with the 2-story or the 3-story kind of comes with the grade, because the land slopes. So we want the appearance of a 2-story structure, but where it's going to go down the hill a little bit, you can get that lower level walkout to have 3 stories kind of there, but it shouldn't feel that way because it's kind of down a hill. So it's almost like it wraps around and comes down. That's how I would describe it. I know it's kind of hard to see that, but that's what I'm.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes. Yep.
Maybe that's nothing to do with the but you're a nonprofit, so you pay no taxes to the town of Groveland. You pay no taxes to the state of Massachusetts, no taxes to the feds. What are you going to do? What is Groveland? I know you get $2 million in rent on this a year. What are you giving back to the town of Groveland to make it so it's not such an expense for us?
Yes, no, so on real estate taxes, so nonprofits are exempt usually from income tax, right? So, but on real estate taxes, we manage 6 communities and we pay real estate tax on those because it's apartment income. So even as a nonprofit, we still pay real estate tax. Now, we haven't had the conversation with the assessor in Groveland yet, but at Nichols Village, we manage Nichols pays close to $500,000 a year on real estate tax. Nichols is a nonprofit organization as well, but they pay about $500,000. I'm pretty sure we're going to end up paying real estate tax or a tax in lieu. We haven't asked for that, but in my experience, we have never not paid real estate tax in all the sites that we manage, even in Boxford. All of these organizations are nonprofit. that tax exemption is usually about income tax, but when we have rental property with rents and income, usually you do end up with some sort of tax. And Maura's probably not happy for talking about this because we haven't had that conversation, but again, usually there's something there. So there will be that. Again, Nichols is a nonprofit. Nichols might be the largest or the second largest taxpayer in the town of Groveland, so.
Can I just say, sorry, just one other point to your question. To build this, we'll have to take out a mortgage, so part of that rental income will go to pay the mortgage. Yeah. Well, it's just just to clarify, you're not getting all that money back.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so that's one other thing too. That's, we typically are going to end up doing trash removal ourselves, right? We don't end up putting out the bins by the road, so we do all the trash. Like at Nichols, we plow our own streets, we do our own trash removal. I assume we're going to do the same here. We're going to remove our own trash, whether we have to hire a dumpster or whether we actually have our own team come and do it. We have a trash compactor set up, so we might not have a dumpster. But we'll end up plowing this, up to Garrison Street. So this isn't a town road, so we'll end up doing that. And the other thing on tax impact, of course, with senior housing, as you all know, is that we don't add to the burden of the schools. We're not bringing in children. It's a senior development, so we're not getting the benefit of sending any kids to the schools, and we do pay for some of those services. This would also be public water and sewer. So we would be paying, connection fees in addition to whatever the water and sewer rates are in town.
Let me give you another,
Yes,
an opinion that I'm a retired principal.
I know,
Actually,
yes.
schools were the very first thing I thought. So whether you've got a 20, 40, 60, 90 is unbelievable. But whatever that number is, you're talking about people selling their homes. So whoever buys my home, if I was to move in, and I haven't heard anything that would motivate me to want to spend $1,200 to $1,500 or to $2,000 a month. When I first moved to Groveland, $500 took care of my mortgage and taxes. The house is now paid for, and and my wife and I are one of the lucky ones in town. We only pay $7,200 in taxes. And I'll bet you there are people here that spend more than 10 grand on taxes. So my wife and I are one of the lucky ones. But whoever buys the house is probably going to, at this stage, is probably going to be coming in with children. So we're talking about elevating class size at the elementary, middle, and high school age. So as soon as I heard you say education, in fact, I'm surprised that we haven't contacted any of the people that are involved in education in town. Because if you've got 90 people, 70 people, 60 families, 20 families, and they're all going to be up for sale, someone probably with children is going to be moving into them.
I think you're right. So this is a good comment. So in the past 25 years, I looked back, I think in the comprehensive plan or one of the town reports, around 2000, there were about 1,200 to 1,300 students enrolled in Groveland schools, and now currently they're under 1,000.
They're down. I spent 5
So
years on the school committee.
it's decreased,
Numbers are
right.
decreasing presently.
and it's expected to decrease through at least 2040.
Well, this
So-
project here could cause them to raise.
It
if
could,
they get full
it could.
capacity
Yep.
of people that are moving into these rentals. Every one of them has, whatever that number is the number of house sales, and probably the real estate people that are in business are gonna
Yep.
love this situation and probably love you guys as well.
Well, it probably would be slow. I haven't done an analysis, but if we did a 45-unit building, if you had, I guess if all of those people came from Groveland, or half, it's 20 to 40 households that free up. So maybe you have 20 or 40 new families that come in. And so you would have a little bit of a bump, but even with that, there's still new housing construction in Groveland, right? There's been some developments, I think I've seen Katy Lane and other ones going on. So
There's some on King.
So there's an ebb and flow. I don't think this is going to overly tax it because the projections are that it's just going to keep going down. So maybe this would help, but I think the town is also saying in some of those reports the aging population is getting so big, they do want families moving into town, because you probably want younger families with kids with disposable incomes to help come in and help economically inject the town. So it's, I don't think it's a debate, I don't think we disagree, but it's a good comment, because I think it could happen, but I don't know that it's what the town doesn't want or the town doesn't need necessarily. But I think what we're trying to do, though, is at least provide a place in Groveland for seniors to be able to downsize if and when they want to, if they found this attractive, or if they were lower income and said, boy, I need a place. And now, instead of going to Haverhill or going to maybe Newburyport, at least they could say, well, at least I can stay in Groveland and I have an option. So that's part of what we're trying to address. Yep.
This, to me, looks like a Fairfield Inn or Hampton Inn. It is surrounded by single-family residences. And I can tell you right now, there are dozens of people who are preparing to move out of Groveland if this comes in. And I think that's an insult to the people who live in this community. This does not conform with the neighborhood. It's in a residential zone, and it's an insult to the people who lived here for a very long time.
Why was
The
it
other
this,
thing-
why was
excuse me.
it this area?
Excuse me, the other thing is,
Go ahead.
on Monday, you talked about Haverhill, Union District, and you talked about Mary Vista. Those are in a mixed-use zone. I don't want a microphone. They're in a mixed-use zone, which means commercial or multifamily. So please don't compare Groveland to Haverhill. We are not Haverhill. This does not belong here. You asked on Monday to consider another site. Please do, because this doesn't conform with the neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
You mentioned that this is a project for people over 62 and above. And it will be based upon income rather than assets.
Right. Yep.
Don't you have to accept people under 62 with a disability, which could be a drug addiction, an alcohol addiction, or mental addiction? And you can't ask what the disability is in the application process.
Maura probably knows too, but that's not true. So with the different options you have, the 62 and over is a strict exception. So you don't, there are projects, I know what you're referring to, and I've seen those before, where you might have a disabled person who's younger who could get in. This is 62 and over regardless. You can't come in under 62 with a disability. So.
And those projects are mostly public housing. So state public housing or federal public housing are senior disabled. This is not public housing.
And I think the question was asked, one second, question was asked, why this site? So as I mentioned on Monday, this site is what's available to us. This again was the Nichols Foundation owns this site. As I said on Monday night, if there's other land in Haverhill, in Groveland to develop, we'd entertain it, but we don't own other land to develop,
Cedardale's up for sale.
and we don't have access, so.
91 acres on Nichols Village, they couldn't find a spot, but this is in Nichols Village.
I'm sorry, there was a question over here first, yep.
That's one of the questions I had, is about 16 times the acreage up at Nichols Village, but they don't want anything to do with this project. What does that say for us? If they don't want it up there, where it's
How do we
already
know they don't
senior
want it?
living,
Okay.
why would it be that they wouldn't want it on that property?
Yep.
All the elderly together.
The Nichols Foundation, it's public knowledge that they have about $35 million in assets. Easily could afford to purchase land anywhere in the area. There's a 22-acre property abutting Nichols Village that has access to Main Street. That's buildable land that would be ideal for something of this scale. It obviously does not belong on Garrison Street. I mean, that rural neighborhood, it's grove land. It's not, it's not, this does not belong. And you were also saying that this is a 7-acre property. It's really 5 acres, maybe buildable. So you're squeezing this, into that small space. Also, the Nichols Village, the Nichols Foundation, you were saying I'm okay. Paying approximately
The
half.
reason he's trying to get people to talk on the mic is so that everybody else can watch the video later. So that's why he's trying to mic it, because otherwise nobody can hear what you guys are saying.
One last thing, that Nichols Village, you mentioned that they pay approximately $500,000 a year to the town. They make charitable donation every year, just, they only claim one charitable donation, this is public information you can look up.
Yep.
Every year to Nichols Village, that's the only charitable donation they make. It's about $1 million or over millions or $1.5 million in the last 10, 15 years, just looking back. And quite ironically, the only other donation other than Nichols Village was Bethany Homes. So that's 10 years ago. Small donation, but interesting that
Yep.
that it happened. Just curious, why can't we look at, they have $35 million in assets, plenty of money to do whatever the hell they want. They could build this anywhere. It does not have to be in this neighborhood.
Why do we have to fight with
Okay.
you? Why do we have to fight with you? Don't you get it? We don't want it there. Put it somewhere else. Why don't you get it?
I mean, with all due
Dick, why don't
respect,
you get
this
it?
is your opinion. I mean, this is an informational meeting.
I'm sorry.
With all
but
due
it
respect,
represents-
this is your
It
opinion.
represents a majority of the people.
I live in the neighborhood.
All right. Well, I think this would be a good time. We've taken some questions. We'll probably just call the meeting to an end. I'm glad to stick around, but I don't want to get into a shouting match or an argument, so
Say a prayer.
we could do that. I mean, I think the only thing I would say is that I think Groveland's a town of 6,500 or more people, so I think there's a lot of people that might have different opinions. I respect that. I appreciate you sharing. We are listening. We will listen, and I will stick around for a few minutes, but I'll take maybe one more question if you have one, or...
Yeah, I just have an informational question.
Sure.
What, do we know what the square footage of land that's going to be paved or covered with building space? I have concerns about hydrological issues. There's already a lot of water that runs down that street, and there is a protected wetland behind it. And I know that once you put pavement over something, and that land is no longer going to absorb water, and I'm just wondering what the square footage of land that's going to be occupied by that is.
Yep, so we did deep hole soil testing out on site. We determined groundwater, soil type, infiltration rates, all of that. We're showing potential subsurface systems over here, which are sized for the impervious area going to it. So that would be roof area, parking area, everything like that. And there is, for what the development is, there's a significant amount of green space being maintained on the site, and anything that's no longer pervious material will be treated in subsurface systems, most likely.
Also, too, I think what we would do, Jay, you could speak to this maybe, is if and when we file plans with the town of Groveland for this, typically their departments would do a review of all the engineering and all the stormwater runoff. And I believe the town typically would hire a third-party reviewer or a peer review to have that done. So I think regarding stormwater or anything else regarding the impermeable surfaces, those calculations would be done, and there'd have to be an approval made that this would, it would be addressed appropriately. Yep.
I just had a quick question.
Yes.
So Nichols Foundation owns the property on Garrison Street.
Yes. Yep.
Have you talked to them at all about all the issues that we see with this being built on Garrison Street? And if they would be, let me finish, please. And they would be willing to look at this plan and incorporate that up in Nichols Village, since they have over 90 acres of land that's not being used for the properties that are up, the property that's up there now, the housing that's up there now.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've kept Nichols apprised of the plans. I think most of what's happened recently is really just the last few weeks, right? We submitted our eligibility application, and then the Board of, Select Board invited us to come just this week. So a lot of the feedback that we're getting has really just been these past few weeks that we've heard from people. So we pass along information, we'll have those discussions, and then we'll take it back and determine what we do next, so. Yes, last question.
I live at 40 Garrison Street. Can you show me on that chart where my house is? I'm kind of curious to see where my house is.
So it'd be the same side of the street, just to the east, right? It's just to the right. Yeah, it's going up the street to the right, yep.
Wow, lucky me.
And the blind woman.
All right, so I got two more questions, yes.
haven't notified, like, as soon as I can do tomorrow.
So we haven't filed, there's been no public hearing, so there's been no abutter notification yet, which will come at some point, but typically the process is to get the determination from the state first, which it could take several months from the time you send that in. And so we were waiting basically until we understood whether this was feasible or not, and then we would do that.
That neighbors were notified, that people in the neighborhood were, like, from Bethany that said that had been spoken to, something happened.
Okay,
That's what makes it feel shady.
okay, okay.
Very unnear where we are. That was, trying to slide it by.
Okay, okay. Well, I'm sorry about that, yes.
See the general, there's a general feeling that there's a dislike for this, and, that we're trying to have a friendly 40B application. Have you considered, what you filed with the state was for 15 units per acre, have you considered having it, making it smaller so it fits more in with the neighborhood? If these buildings half the size, it would be half, so it would be.
Make it go
Five.
in the neighborhood.
Something? No?
Residential neighborhood, no, it's a residential neighborhood.
It's just a.
Yeah. I think,
I mean, if it goes, if it comes back to the Board of Appeals, the final part of the application gets rejected, then it's gotta be, it would be appealed to the state. The whole thing has to go all over it, start all over it.
yeah, I would say, I think we're willing to consider and be flexible and see what the options are. I mean, I can't say yes or no, but do we take the information back and look at something different, or one instead of two, or changing it? Yeah, I think we're trying to be open and reasonable and hear from people and listen and see what could work.
Just do what's right for us, that's all. This doesn't seem right.
Okay, all right, well, thank you for coming. Hopefully it was helpful, and we will follow up from here, but I wish you all a good night. Thank you.